Hey guys, it's Becky. Welcome to my channel. I have a video that I think will be really helpful for those of you who are planning to homeschool all the way through high school. I know there's not a whole lot of talk about homeschooling through high school on YouTube. So just a little background on us. We actually did homeschool our oldest daughter all the way through high school. She graduated our homeschool high school in May of 2022, and she actually just graduated college in May of 2023. So she got her associate's degree, but we did homeschool her and did all her transcript and all that stuff that you have to do for college, and it worked out really well. And I learned a lot in that process with her that I am in turn putting towards our youngest daughter, who we also plan to homeschool all the way through. So something that I know I wondered, and I've gotten a lot of questions about over the years, is how do you assign credit for high school classes? So obviously when your child is in high school, either it's public school or homeschooled, somebody somewhere is keeping grades and creating a transcript for your child so that when they graduate, they have that transcript that shows every class they took, the credits they earned, the grade they got, their GPA, and obviously if they're going to college, colleges are going to want to see that transcript in order to admit them to whatever college or university they want to go to. So one of my main tips for homeschooling through high school is to make sure that you are keeping very thorough records. It is going to save you a ton of time at the end of the 4 years when you have as much detail and record of what your child did as possible. Now maybe you don't need it all, but it's definitely going to be in your best interest to keep really good records all throughout the 4 years that your child is doing high school classes. So one thing I will preface this by saying, in our daughter's case in particular, she did do dual credit her junior and senior year, which means she took college classes that counted for college credit, but they also counted for her high school requirements. So typically a 1 semester college course is equal to a full credit in high school. So keep that in mind. But other than that, there are 2 main ways that I think are most common when it comes to assigning credit for high school. So those 2 main ways are by hours, and the other way is by completion of the book or the curriculum. So for the completion of the book, basically, you've bought 1 book for English, let's say, or history. And that entire, you're supposed to finish that entire book in a given school year. So you would just look at that book and say how many lessons are in the book, and then divide that by the amount of weeks that you are going to be homeschooling. And then that will give you an idea of how many times per week your child needs to do that certain subject, use that certain resource in order to complete that book by the end of the year. So when you do that, one thing I want to say is make sure that you allow a little bit of a buffer in there for either maybe an assignment that your child is going to be struggling with and may have an issue with, maybe sick days, maybe an unplanned vacation. So I definitely wouldn't want to cut it down to the wire so close that if your child misses a lesson here or there, that you're going to not finish it in that school year. So make sure you do put a little bit of a buffer in there if you're going to be using that method, because you will probably not get every single lesson done each week in order to complete it by the end of the year. Also, don't be afraid to skip lessons. I know sometimes it can be really tempting to think I have to do every single lesson in every single book or we didn't complete it. And that's definitely not true. Now, obviously you don't want to be skipping huge chunks of something unless your child is just really, really accelerated in certain subjects. If that's the case, you might want to pick a higher level of something or a different curriculum. But overall, you don't want to skip too many things, but if your child really truly knows and has this certain thing down pat, there's no sense in making them do that lesson anyway, just for the sake of finishing the book. So those 2 things, kind of keep that in mind if you're doing the completion method. But overall, that's really what we have done the most. I found it has worked the best for us. It's the easiest for me as far as planning goes. So that's the first method, is just completing the book in a certain school year and then giving that credit for that class at the end of the year. The second method that I think is the most common is by hours spent on a certain subject. Typically 150 hours is about the minimum that you would probably be able to still count it as a full high school credit, but there's a range there of about 150 to 180 is pretty common hours spent on a certain subject to be able to count for a full high school credit. I feel like this method is a little bit more rigid, and it's one that we didn't do a whole lot just because it is kind of tedious keeping hours. Like, well, I spent 4 hours this week and then she did 3 hours that week. It got really stressful, and it can be really hard to keep up with, and it can be overwhelming because you always feel like you're like punching that clock, and that can be a little bit stressful for you and for the student. So we don't do that a whole lot, but I can see there is value in that if your child is especially using more than one resource for a certain subject. So the completion of the book method is really nice if you're just using one book, start to finish, kind of cut and dried, easy peasy. If you're using several things, like maybe you've got your main source text, but then you've got a lot of outside reading that's going to count for that, and maybe you've got another book that you're doing some activities out of, and maybe they're doing like a field trip, like all these things you're kind of combining to be able to count as a high school credit, that would be the time that I would probably recommend doing the hourly method. But again, I really feel like that can very easily become cumbersome for you and your student. So I don't recommend that one as much, but obviously it's up to you and your child and your life and how you want your homeschool to go. But it's definitely an option for you, and I think it would work best for people who are doing kind of a very eclectic curriculum for a certain subject. I feel like that would be a really good way to be able to assign high school credit for that course. So that's pretty much it. That's pretty much the two most conventional ways of having your child earn high school credit. Like I said, dual credit is another great option if you want to fast track your child's college education a little bit. Now there are definite pros and cons to that, and I did talk about that in a video which is in my homeschooling playlist. I will link it for you. Definitely some pros and cons for that. Overall, I'm so glad that we did it, and you know, she was able to graduate, and she's 19 and she's already got her associate's degree. So I feel like it definitely saved her a lot of time in college. It saved us a lot of money because typically dual credit classes are cheaper if you take them as a high school student versus taking that same class as a full-time college student. So it saved us quite a bit of money that way. So there are some good things about it. The main thing that I didn't love about it was it did take those classes away from us being able to do something else that we wanted to. You know, if you're doing dual credit, you have to do what the college is telling you to do. So it obviously took a little bit of the freedom away from us that we had been used to, of being able to pick our own curriculum and kind of go at our own pace. But I think it's part of growing up. It's part of the process. It was going to have to happen one way or the other anyway, because obviously she was going to be going to college. So it just made that happen a little sooner than I would have liked. But overall, I still think the benefits outweigh the negatives. And I do highly recommend, if you have a kid that you're going to be homeschooling through high school and they do want to go to college, I highly recommend you look into dual credit classes, because those are, overall, it was a very good experience for both of us. So I hope this video was helpful. If it was, make sure you give it a thumbs up. Also, don't forget to check out my homeschooling playlist. I've mentioned it a couple times already, but I think there's a lot of great information in that playlist. I think there's almost 250 videos now of just all homeschooling related stuff. So homeschooling through high school, homeschool curriculum choices, homeschool room tours, like all kinds of stuff. There's tons of information in that playlist I think will be really helpful to you, so make sure you check that out. Give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.